Hey, this is Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC. Today I'll be showing you how to install a Quiet-Glide skid plate from Tusk on this Polaris RZR. The Tusk Quiet-Glide skid plate is the perfect accessory to give the underside of your UTV optimum protection while you're out on the trail. It gives way more coverage than the stock skid plate and is made from unbreakable 3/8" thick UHMW. Not only is this skid plate tough, but it slides quietly against rocks and it won't dent like an aluminum plate would. Another great feature of the skid plate is that the hardware underneath is countersunk, and that will keep it from catching or hanging up on anything. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Now remember, this install is specific to the XP4 1000. First things first, read through your provided set of instructions and get familiar with the install process. Also, make sure you received all of your pieces and hardware needed for the install. To do this job, you'll need some basic hand tools, rags, and safety glasses. You'll also need the instructions that came in your kit for proper procedures and more information. I also have a set of machine ramps as well as an ATV jack to help make the install a little easier. If you choose to raise or lift your machine up, make sure and do it safely to avoid any injury to yourself or damage to your machine. With the machine up on the ramps, we're now ready to remove our stock skid plate. And when we do that, keep all of your hardware organized because we will be reusing most of it. Now we'll install our front diff skid, and to do that, first we'll take our double hole threaded plate and install it onto the frame above these two holes. Now there's two holes in the front of the frame where our skid plate mounts, so we'll take an 11/64 drill bit to drill out the plate just behind those holes. Now we'll take two of our stock skid plate bolts and we'll get two of our washers that came with our hardware kit, and we'll install it through our new skid plate into the front of the frame where we just drilled our holes. Now these are self-tapping screws, so they'll create threads as they go in. With those bolts installed, we'll now take our two 1-inch flathead Allen bolts and screw them into the double threaded plate. As we go through the process, make sure you leave all the hardware a little loose. We'll make any adjustments that we need to do, and then we'll go ahead and tighten everything up. Next, we'll install the frame brackets to the top portions of our main skid plates using the 5/8 flat Allen bolts, and there should be 16 of these. And when we do this, on the front portion of the skid plate, we'll leave the last two bolts on the back loose. Now we're ready to install our main skid. We'll take two of the bolts and washers that came off the stock skid plate and use a jack to jack up the front portion of our new skid and use the two bolts to temporarily hold it in place. With those bolts loosely installed, we can now align the front of the skid with the holes in the frame. And we'll take our T40 1-inch bolts and drive them into the frame. So we'll now move to the passenger side of our vehicle. Next, we'll take our M8 by 55mm bolt, put the flat washer on it, and insert it through the slot in our front skid into the billet tube clamp. Next, we'll use a jack to lift up on the skid plate next to the clamp, and using the bolt that's already installed, we'll align the other hole so we can install our M8 by 40mm flathead Allen bolt. Now that we've installed the Allen bolt, it's important to make sure we tighten this one all the way first, and then tighten the M8 by 55mm bolt. Repeat this procedure for the other side. Using a jack, we'll line the rear skid up and slide it underneath the front skid. We'll hold the rear main skid in place by using 5 of the bolts and washers that came off our stock skid plate, and we'll loosely install them. Next, we'll take our 3/8 button Allen head bolts, apply some Loctite, and install them into our frame brackets. Starting on the passenger side of the vehicle, we'll remove the 3 T40 Torx bolts that come stock on the machine. Then we'll lift the skid plate into place using a jack and reinstall the factory bolts. Now we'll repeat these steps on the other side. Next, we'll take care of the 4 mounting bolts that go in the rear main skid, and we'll start with the outer 2 using the 5/16 by 1 inch flathead bolts, and they'll go into the single threaded mounting plate. Now for the center 2 holes, the only difference is we'll take this UHMW spacer and we'll put it in between the frame and the skid plate. And keep in mind that this bolt is a 5/16 by 1.5. Now we'll repeat this process on the other side. Next, we'll install the rear skid. And to do that, you can have a friend help you lift it up into place or use a jack. We'll take 2 of the bolts that came from the stock skid plate and install it into the existing holes and leave them loose so we can make adjustments. Next, we'll take our M6 by 15 millimeter bolts that came in the kit and use some of the stock washers that came off the stock skid plate, and we'll install them into the 2 holes on our rear skid section. There are 6 additional mounting holes on the rear section, but before we do anything with these, we'll need to line the skid plate up as best as possible and tighten the hardware that we have on right now, and then we can drill those out. Now that we have the rear skid section installed, we're ready to drill out the 6 holes with our included drill bit. And when you do this, go slow and be careful not to hit anything on the other side. Now we can take our 1.5 inch Torx thread cutting screws and install the UHMW spacer in the back. We'll install those 2 bolts first, followed by the other 4. Now we'll take our drill bit and drill the 4 remaining holes in our main skid plate sections. Now when you're drilling these holes out, make sure you don't drill too far because we don't want to damage anything that's on the other side. The other thing you want to pay attention to is you don't want to widen out the holes that are already in the skid plate. Then we'll take our T40 socket and install our 1 inch bolts into the holes we just drilled. Now we'll go through and tighten all remaining hardware. And that's all there is to installing the Tusk Quiet-Glide Skid Plate. This kit is available on our website with just about anything you could want for your machine. So be sure to check that out. And if you do a lot of gnarly off-road riding, we have the Tusk Mohawk suspension parts. So check that out. They're stronger than stock. They give you more performance and clearance where you need it. So if you like this video and want to see more like it, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.